So when I was a kid, I remember at some point I went to a place and they had these Lego robots that they were playing with. And I remember that as soon as I heard that, I was just so interested in how you can build something and put something together. And that's kind of what got me into robotics in general. And then in university, I was lucky enough to get involved in a competition that involves building a small submarine. And that was kind of my introduction to marine robotics in general and working with stuff underwater. And I found that incredibly interesting. Hi, my name is Khaled. I am a robotics engineer here at the National Oceanography Centre. And my job is to write code for the submarine right behind me to make it do stuff. So moving, integrating sensors to get data for the scientists. The main thing that I get involved with is writing code that either makes the submarine itself do something. So for example, recently I've worked on a new sensor that was added to the submarine, and my job was to make the submarine talk to it. And the idea is we want to be able to ask the sensor to do something when the submarine is at a particular depth underwater. And so my job was to write that bit of code that makes the submarine talk to the sensor. So that's kind of one aspect of the job. Sometimes I write software that we use on the ship to talk to the submarine. So for example, if we want to see on a map where the submarine is right now or how it's moving, so that's one thing that I can get involved in. Personally, after finishing school, I went to university and did a degree for 5 years, graduated with a master's in engineering, and then this was my first job after that. But generally you could start from something a bit lower than that, so for example just a bachelor in engineering would be sufficient. So in school personally I did A-levels in maths, further maths and physics. So generally I tend to work from 9 to 5, and depending on what's going on at work, my schedule tends to change. So sometimes I'm working at the office, writing code, or down at the workshop, adding new stuff to the submarine or testing existing code. If we have a cruise to go on, then there will be a lot of preparation, so I'll spend most of my day at the workshop making sure the submarine is ready and just running through tests. So as a robotics engineer, or really a sort of an engineer in the space where you're doing programming or electronics, your options are varied quite a lot, because you can get involved in things like marine robotics, where you deal with underwater stuff, or even surface robots. There's quite a lot of those. But also there are things like driverless cars, which are on the rise now, and that's another thing that I know I could get involved in if I wanted to. I think the one piece of advice that I'd give is to be curious and willing to learn. I did spend, I think, a fair amount of time at university, 5 years, but the most of what you learn is you learn on the job. So you're not expected to know everything. All you're expected to do really is to be willing to learn, to be willing to ask the right questions, and to accept the advice that you get, and to accept the knowledge that you'll get. So be curious is probably the number one advice that I personally try to follow and that I would give.